I find it quite surprising sometimes how people say to me, like, oh, you don't really need to go to church, do you, Father? All that matters is that you're a good person. And then I say to them, well, what do you think it means to be good?
Every human desire is for flourishing, it's for happiness, and it's through the virtues that by acquiring these virtues and developing them, we really can perfect those powers and live a good life, which is a happy life.
And that's a really important point that we want to make, that goodness and happiness, these aren't divorced from one another, but part of the same life.
So I think then we need to think about what makes a human being a human being. Hello, I'm Father John Church.
Hello, I'm Father Toby Lees.
And welcome to Good Habits, our podcast exploring questions of meaning through the tradition of the virtues. Before we get going, I think we should introduce ourselves.
Yeah, we don't live in the same priory
no,
anymore,
indeed.
so need to remember, who are you?
Yeah.
So I'm Father Toby. I live in our priory in London, priest director of Radio Maria England, and I used to be a lawyer for 7 years before I entered the order about 13 years ago, being a priest a little over 6.
I'm Father John. I live in Leicester, Holy Cross Priory in Leicester, and I run our province's young adults ministry, which there's lots going on in Leicester and all around about the place as well. Good Habits, what's that about?
About looking awesome like this. not the only reason I joined, but we're looking at what virtue is. I think you often hear virtue used in the context of virtue signalling. But we think, and negative, but we think virtue is actually something pretty good and a really important part of the moral life, and want to think about what the moral life is more generally.
And a good habit being a definition of a virtue, a good thing we do regularly.
Yes.
As one. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I was thinking about this, I was reflecting on my time in the order and how my understanding of what the good life, what a good habit is, what morality is, and a little bit when I was growing up, I used to just think morality was about the 10 commandments, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, and then maybe a little bit on top every now and then give something to charity. And now my understanding is quite different. Not that I think actually it's fine to steal and murder now, but actually it's bigger than that. I wonder what your conception of things was growing up.
Growing up, I think quite rules-based, ultimately, in that I just really dislike being told off. So I think morality largely had to do with not being told off. And I was probably very annoying as a teacher's pet at times. But I think, and the virtues are definitely part of the conversation, but I never really connected the virtues and morality, so to speak. They were sort of words I'd heard about, but didn't connect them to the moral life.
I do remember one rather embarrassing incident from my childhood, which my mother likes to remind people of. And so I feel just get it out there now to the maximum possible audience, that clearly I'd done something pretty naughty as a kid. And there I was sitting on the top of the stairs, and my mother likes to remind me that I said, "Mummy, please teach me how to be good." And not, teach me how not to get caught, but teach me how to be good. And that, I think, is the essence of what we're here to talk about. The virtues are good habits that make you good, make you a good person.
And that this is about the good life.
Yes.
Very much so. I suppose some people might wonder, what do 2 Catholic priests have to say about the good life? Maybe pontificating is our thing. But no, that's what we want to explore in this series, what it is to live a good life, and that the good life is a happy life.
Yeah, and I think the idea that you could say something objectively about what the good life is, to some people that might seem a bit presumptuous. They say, well, you've got your idea of the good life, but I've got my idea of mine, and I don't need to hear anything more from you. Thank you very much. And yet, interestingly, when you're in the street, people take goodness very seriously, because I find it quite surprising sometimes how people say to me, like, oh, you don't really need to go to church, do you, Father? All that matters is that you're a good person.
Yeah.
And then I say to them, well, what do you think it means to be good?
I've heard similar comments. So how would you begin to approach this question of the good life?
Well, let's use a hypothetical example. Say I told you that we got a Christmas bonus from our parishioners very generously, and that I thought, oh, I'd like to spend a bit of money and get a pet. Walk off a few of the Christmas calories, plus security in the priory could do with being ramped up a little bit. And then I'm very lucky, I live close to Hampstead Heath. be nice to go for walks on there with the pet and to throw a ball and have the pet chase the ball.
So you got a dog of some description?
No, I got a cat, and it's not doing any of these things. And Father Rudolph's complaining that all his wool keeps on getting stolen and all my goldfish are going missing.
Odd, stupid decision.
Yeah, well, yeah. You know that dogs do certain things, and the good life of a dog consists in doing certain things. And if I told you that I'd got a dog and it wasn't doing any of these things, you go, well, is there something wrong with the dog? But if I tell you I've got a cat and it's not doing any of these things, then you think, well, actually, then the problem's with you, not with the cat. And that we recognize in most animals that there is something that their good consists in, what flourishing for that animal looks like. And what we're going to say is that for the human person, there is absolutely a shape of what the good life looks like.
And so that's intricately related to what kind of a thing for an animal, what kind of animal it is what its good life looks like.
Yes, it's easier in some ways to frame this negatively.
Yeah.
In that if I were to tell you about a person who was absolutely horrid at making decisions,
yeah,
and that they really didn't care about the impact of those decisions on other people, but also at the first sign of anything getting a little bit hard, that they just gave up. And then also that they were just completely dominated by their desire for food and for sex, that you wouldn't say that looked like a good life.
No, and not an especially happy one.
No. And that's a really important point that we want to make, that goodness and happiness, these aren't divorced from one another, but part of the same life.
Yeah. It brings to mind there's a really interesting story used in Plato's Republic, the conversation between Socrates and Glaucon, and they're debating what is justice, but justice there taken to mean the moral life in totality. And Glaucon wants to make the case that ultimately we're all driven by preferences. We just want to seek what we want. Morality is just a compromise, that we have morals and laws to help us get along, but ultimately all that we really want to do is just pursue our desires. And he uses this mythical story called the Ring of Gyges to demonstrate this. And he speaks of a shepherd who comes across a ring. And the shepherd finds this ring, puts it on, and it makes him invisible. And so Glaucon tells a story. The shepherd goes on and kills the king, seduces his wife, takes the kingdom, so on and so forth. And Glaucon basically uses to say that if you remove the consequences from your actions, everyone will just reduce to what they really want to do, which is follow their base desires. Mm-hmm. And so Glaucon's argument is that if you take a moral person, a good person, a just person, and an immoral person, give them both a ring of Gyges, they'll both do exactly the same thing. So actually, he's arguing there is no connection between the good life and our happiness and our flourishing, because we just want to pursue our desires. Morality is unconnected.
Whereas I'm going to guess Socrates says something rather different.
He says something rather different. And so Socrates makes the case, which is what I think we want to explore in this series, that the just person, the good person, would still be good even when there are no consequences because of invisibility, because that's what belongs to the happy life, to flourishing.
In the way that people sometimes say, character is who you are when nobody's looking.
Yes, exactly.
And I think a good example of why sort of what Glaucon is arguing doesn't make people happy, when you look sometimes at the sort of gangster movies, or you look at a series like Top Boy on TV or something, the head gangster or the top drug dealer, they're never particularly happy people.
Yeah.
They have the trappings of things, but they're always watching over their shoulder, always worried about getting stabbed in the back. Actually living this life, doing whatever you want, isn't actually conducive to being truly happy.
Nor particularly free. There's a sort of a sense in which I think characters of that kind, if you're constantly worrying about what people are going to do, or how they're going to kind of responding to certain pressures, there's a sense of inhibition there. That the happy life, the flourishing life, is one of true freedom as well.
So I think the next thing to think about then is, I gave the example of, we can see for a dog what the good life looks like. We can see for a cat what the good life looks like. We could talk about with a particular object, whether it was a good object like a can opener at doing that particular thing. But for a human being to say what the good life consists of, where might you start looking in order to think about that?
So I think then we need to think about what makes a human being a human being. So if as you mentioned, we can do this more easily. Well, it's more obvious with animals, say, or with a tool like a hammer. A good hammer is one used to hit nails in the wall rather than fix computers. And so what is particular to being a human being? And the tradition that we're talking out of, the Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas, who we'll mention a lot, a Dominican friar, theologian, philosopher of the 13th century, speaks about the powers of the human person, which are these different capacities we have, some of which we share in common with other creatures, some of which are distinctively human. And what really makes us what we are these capacities we have. And the first of them, he speaks of three, groups them in three, and the first of them are the vegetative powers, which is sort of what we share with all plants and animals and living beings.
So you've got things like nutrition, growth,
Mrs.
being able
Nerg.
to reproduce.
Yeah, exactly. Or Mrs. Gren, or whatever you learnt at school biology.
Yeah.
I forget them all exactly. The phrase "vegging out on the couch" comes to mind as an exemplification of our vegetative powers being exercised.
That's interesting. Yeah, language can be really revelatory sometimes about that's behaving in a less than human way. Although, obviously, if you're watching this, you're not vegging out. You're engaging.
Indeed.
You're engaging some of the faculties which we'll come to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. Highly engaged, edge of the seat stuff.
So what's next? If I'm moving up from being a vegetable, what
an image!
which I'm aspiring to. What will come next?
What will come next is the sensitive powers. So these have to do with things like our perception and our engagement in the world, and we how we react to things we see and the objects around us and so on. And our sensitive powers are things we would say we share with a lot of the animal kingdom, mammals and birds and fish and so on, in different degrees with different mammals. There are some, I think you can grade these things if you want. You can think of the more intelligent beings as well, and which have more sensory capacities. You can think of clams at the bottom end of the scale. It's interesting. I mean, it's a topic that's debated a lot.
Sean clams.
Yeah. But well, yeah, exactly. I was just thinking about new laws about how you're supposed to eat lobsters nowadays because of what they sense and so on. How sensitive are they? But the sensitive powers are that there are response to our powers of perception.
Yeah. So you can perceive the world, and also, this is why you're downing on the clams. But the other animals, most of the other animals can also move about in the world.
Exactly.
So you've got sensitive powers and the possibility of locomotion.
Exactly. Yeah,
you can move.
Exactly. And then, and the final stage is what we would talk about, the powers that are distinctively human, and those St. Thomas Aquinas talks about intellect and will. Intellect being our rational capacity, our power to think, which is ultimately directed towards the truth, that we seek the truth. And our will is, the technical term, is our rational appetite, our desire formed by reason for the good, is directed towards the good. And that's what's distinctive about human beings.
Yeah. And this is why we need virtues. The life of a dog is less complex than that of a human being, and the dog doesn't have to think hard about how to be a good dog. He just operates largely by instinct. Whereas for us, because of this power of the intellect, this power of rational thought, rational desiring, things get a little bit more complicated. And the intellect is looking at the truth in general. And the intellect is also what enables us to look at a Chihuahua, look at a Rottweiler, and look at a some like poodle or a Labrapoodle or a cockadoodle seems to be pretty popular. Just browsing through, looking on eBay but cats were cheaper. So.
Yeah, good.
But I can look at all of those,
yeah.
And even though they look really different, I can say about all of them, well, they're a dog.
Yeah.
So the intellect enables me to move from this particular thing to actually saying this kind of thing in general. The intellect is the power that enables us to engage in abstract thought.
Yeah.
And in the same way, I'm able to think about desiring the good in general, not just what's in front of me right now, but actually to think, well, maybe I won't eat what's in front of me right now because that'll spoil my appetite for something later. So we have this sense of the true in general and the good in general, but it also makes our lives a little bit more complicated. The line that Aquinas uses with regards to these powers is that they're sort of not yet specified or underdetermined. And so we have to look at, how will I go for truth? How will I seek to pursue the highest good? And that's why then we need virtue to help sort of hone these powers that we already have, but in order to help us to act in a way where we consistently use these powers in the best possible way.
So the virtues are perfecting those powers, in a sense. The virtues are the qualities we have that make those powers as perfect as they can be.
Absolutely. They're not something that comes completely from outside and is in addition to what I already had. Rather, they're something that takes what I already have and perfects them.
And I think this makes it so clear that the good life is the happy life, because if the good life, exercising our virtues, perfects those powers, perfects what it means to be a human being virtuous makes you the best possible version of yourself, so to speak. You are the most perfect you can be. You are really perfected, and that's your flourishing. That's the ultimate. Every human desire is for flourishing. It's for happiness, and it's through the virtues that, by acquiring these virtues and developing them, that we really can perfect those powers and live a good life, which is a happy life.
Yeah, but part of the problem for us is that we struggle sometimes to recognize, like, what is the good thing to do in this particular moment. There I am sitting at the top of the stairs saying, "Mummy, please teach me how to be good." I've got that desire to be good, but I get it wrong sometimes. And I think that brings us on to why we need the virtue of prudence, which we're going to discuss at length in a future episode.
Exactly. And just to mention that you bring it up, so the virtues which we're going to go through, there are traditionally 7 of them, and we think of the 4 natural virtues, which have to do more or less with our natural life, how we live, in distinct to the supernatural virtues, the theological virtues, which have to do with our life towards God. And the natural virtues classically, and this is interestingly, these 4, prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, are a 4 that's classified across the Western tradition. Aristotle and Plato and Cicero and Augustine and Aquinas and so on. And fundamentally, we think of prudence in terms of perfecting the power of the intellect, the mind, which we'll come on to. Justice, perfecting the will, the power of the will. And then the other 2, temperance and fortitude, to do with our passions, our emotions, which we'll also speak more about. So temperance perfects those desires we have for things we want, and fortitude is about perfecting our things that place some kind of obstacle in front of us.
Yeah. And the final point that I want to make is that it's important when Aquinas has that understanding of the human person that we spoke about, and you gave us 3 different types of soul, types of creatures that can exist: the kind of the vegetative life, the animal, and the rational. He sees all of those lower powers being present in the human person. But what's unique about the human person is that reason can also enter into our more animal desiring. We can sometimes say about somebody, "Oh, it's like something out of a Jane Austen novel. She was behaving in a perfectly beastly manner." We recognize there was something less than human in the way the person was behaving then. And so what's distinctive about virtue from the way that we sometimes think about habit, as in, bad habit, like he picks his nose or he bites his nails, that tends to suggest something unthinking.
Automated.
Yeah, exactly. On just operating in default mode. But for Aquinas, the good habit, for it to be truly a habit, reason has to come into it. It has to have the intellectual power entering even into that lower power.
And so just because when we're talking about a virtue, we're not talking about the action. We're talking about the disposition to perform the good action.
Yeah, so something starts to change in us, like the virtuous person, by virtue of becoming virtuous, starts to do good things, the sorts of things that we would call virtuous. But virtue is a quality which is actually existing in the human person. So I'm not courageous just because I happen to do something courageous in this particular instance, because that courageous action could be completely out of character for me. Yeah. Rather, I'm courageous when I'm the sort of person who sort of joyfully, promptly, easily, in a situation which requires the virtue of courage, behaves in that sort of way.
The thing I find always so fascinating about the virtues in this way, that they give us a real creativity in our action, because they're not automated. The virtuous person won't do the same thing in every situation. So you would say if you had two chess players, one only knows one set of moves and the other can respond creatively to the situation. The creative one is definitely the more skillful chess player. And similarly, the virtues give us these skills to respond creatively by pursuing the good and seeking the truth and so on in different situations. And that's so important in the moral life, where we constantly find ourselves in complex moral situations, even at a simple level. And it's not enough just to go to the library, look up a book, what shall I do in this situation?
Yeah, and we also just don't have the means to be able to do that in any given situation. Exactly. It's not available to me to phone a friend or to get the 50-50. I have to be able to promptly and almost in a certain way, it becomes second nature to me to behave well.
Which is Aristotle's phrase for the virtues is it's a second nature, right? Which is, I find, such a helpful phrase, the idea that it really becomes a part of us. But it's a second nature in the sense that we've acquired it. So those, I mentioned earlier, those four natural virtues of prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude, we can acquire. And just to finish off that, because I did mention there are 7, in case people are worrying about the cliffhanger, the other 3 are, of course, faith, hope, and charity, which are the theological virtues. Faith resides in our intellect, perfects our intellect so that we can come to know God, what God reveals of himself. Hope resides in the will so that we can come to enjoy God and seek the true goodness, the hope that lies in the future, the presence of God. And charity is everything, is our friendship with God. And we would talk about them as theological in the sense that we can only exercise those virtues because God has given them to us.
Yeah. So with the first 4 that we're going to look at, we can broadly call them acquired virtues, and they are things that we can intentionally go about seeking to acquire for ourselves. But whereas those last 3, faith, hope, and charity, they're gifts, or what we might call infused virtues. They have to be given to us.
We rely on God's help for them. Exactly. Yeah. Wonderful. I think with that, well set up for the rest of the series.
Excellent.
I look forward to it.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you. Good Habits is a CTS production in collaboration with the Dominican Friars in Britain
and Radio Maria England. And if you've liked this episode, which I sincerely hope you have, then please do like and subscribe.